Good evening. It's 7:07 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Rob. I've got
So
with
you
me
know where your
RDB from
kids
the
are.
Great Midwest. Well, I'm letting people know that we did start 7 minutes late, but it's never too late to talk about great films. And what we have here tonight, an Xtreme movie show
Yep.
from the Pinal Spouse, just west of Orlando, Florida, is How the West Was Won, which um, I want to say this to just kind of start off and jump right into some of my early observations about this film before handing it over to you for yours. Is that this was a movie that I had seen once as a kid, and I remember for certain reasons. Because one, I hadn't really seen many westerns, and still haven't, honestly.
No.
I don't hate them, I don't like them. It depends on the theme. But to me, this movie, while an epic movie and a great looking one at that, I feel it's kind of like one of those really kind of clean cut, sanitized ones because there's really not a lot of what I would call hardcore violence or things we associate with the
No.
West. Like if we were watching Deadwood or something,
No.
we'd be
No.
like, oh yeah, death, distemper,
This is
horrors,
it's
guns, Indians, scalps, all that stuff. Here, this is just more of like a family valued center type thing that a younger person could actually watch, especially back in the 60s or afterwards, because this came out in 62,
it's
63.
pretty much a John Wayne film without John Wayne hardly being in it. That's the way I
Yeah,
look at it. It's How the West Was Won. It's I believe it was the same guy, John Ford, who directed The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Stagecoach and a lot of those other ones. Early days, The Quiet Man, Grapes of Wrath. So and Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, obviously that's Jimmy Stewart, and you have John Wayne in there.
Jack
Which
Palance as well.
which yeah, well, Jack Palance. But yeah, so John Wayne's hardly in this. Jimmy Stewart's at the very beginning, and I was really excited for Professor Pixelless because he doesn't have any pixels to show up.
That's rich, bro. Continue.
I was hoping he would, because he's a big Jimmy Stewart fan. I figured I want to get his take on that. With Jimmy Stewart being the beginning, hitting on Debbie Reynolds' sister in this.
Some pretty
Uh,
women in this.
dude, I gotta say though, and dude, honestly, I got a little chub, apart from the girls, but the white rapid scene, the white rapid scenes when they're on the thing, and I'm thinking like, I know this is fake, but then you see scenes that actually is on water though. It's like, I mean, it was probably in a pool, but still, it's like, it looked really cool. It looked authentic, no green screen. I mean, they might have had a little bit, but not as much as you'd see today. It would be water would all be CG.
Yes.
These people okay. I guess we'll start from the very beginning. The whole thing is about it's 1881. Actually, was it 1881? It was
It's like almost like an anthology,
1839.
but
Yeah,
connected with
yeah,
family members.
1839. The families, Debbie Reynolds and her family, the Prescotts are moving west. They're going to the Erie Canal. They're going on the Erie Canal, going out west. They're going to settle there. And, they run into Jimmy Stewart. He's just basically a mountain man, and Jimmy Stewart looks really cool in this. I'm like, at first I'm like, man, did he paint on his 5 o'clock shadow? Because it didn't look real at first. But then, like, so basically he's kind of like, he looked like a skeevy guy, he's like, can you trust this guy? But then he's macking on
He didn't look like Jimmy Stewart.
No, and he's macking on the other daughter, and then she's all hot and bothered. She's like, oh, because she said like, I wish I could find somebody, a man, and then she comes across him, and he's like, well, ma'am, he tells her, I'm not really the kind of person you want to go. I'm gonna leave you. I'm gonna go spend my money in hooch and sin. I'm a sinful man. And she's like, I don't care. I'm thinking like, damn, like this girl is just really wants to get some. And so
Old enough at that time where she needs to be provided
yeah.
for.
So they spend the night together. He leaves in the morning. It goes down to this cave, and I'm looking like it had this cave here, and it's basically got these people in there. Like this guy's guy, and then he's got his cute daughter, and she's like, hey, here, have this, get this big old jug, all that's missing was the cartoon X on it, the skull. But he's got his moonshine, he's got hooch, he's going in there. She's like, we trapped this beast down here. I'm thinking like, oh man, she's gonna kill you. She's gonna kill you. And then she's like, it's down in this abyss right down here. Why don't you go look at the edge? So he does. And then she pushes him in there, and they're like, oh, they're gonna go loot his stuff. And the pirates, leave. But he survived. He swam under. and got out. And she made a crack about how she stabbed him, but I don't think she even stabbed him. Maybe I misheard, but he tracks them down. The pirates go where Debbie Reynolds and her family is. Prescott's are settlers in there. They attack them. They got him hostage. They're gonna rob him, and then Jimmy Stewart saves the day, throws an axe, and then throws a knife, and then they win. And then he eventually kind of I think he kind of goes his way again. I can't remember what it was, but we cut off from that. From them, we go to St. Louis, all the way over where the fur trading business, got the riverboat, Gregory Peck. And I was just like, this is like an hour into it. Yes, Gregory Peck. We're introduced to Debbie Reynolds' character again, who had left her family. Yeah, she's like, I can't deal with this anymore. She went back east. And she's singing again, and she's singing the main song here. I forgot what the Christmas song it's based off of, because it sounds like a Christmas freaking song. They just changed the words.
Right.
And she's up there doing her little stage dance again, and we see Gregory Peck, makes a bet with this other guy. He's like, I bet you, how many petticoats she has under their layers. And they're sitting there, and then he finds out that she gets a letter in the backstage saying that she inherited gold from her gold mine from her family.
How convenient.
How convenient. He's like, oh shit, I know. But of course that he owes money because to these other guys, he follows her, they hooks up with her, and then we get to this other guy. I forgot who the actor is, but he's just so hung up on her. And it's interesting that this guy's leading the railroad, or they're going to build the railroad, or we're going to the whole thing. They're leading everybody on going west, and Gregory Peck's with her, but this guy keeps on macking her. He's like, "Hey, I want you to be my wife, have kids. You don't have to do anything. I'll be a rich man. I'll have all this stuff."
People cut to the chase a bit more back in the old days.
Yeah. So she turned him down twice, and then he shows up and corners her in her tent the second time, and I'm thinking this is where the guy who, because this is actually written by the guy. Part of this movie was James R. Webb. He's the guy who wrote this. Also wrote Cape Fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, this is Cape Fear going into the West. You see the kind of the creepiness. This guy. I'm thinking is he gonna try something with her? But he doesn't. Instead she's in love with Gregory Peck, even though he's a gambler and he leaves her. So after all this nonsense goes, we go into the Civil War, and Civil War is going to be happening soon, and so basically we see Debbie Reynolds' sister. Back to her, she's on the ranch. She's settled down. It turns out she ended up marrying Jimmy Stewart. Had 2 kids. The kids are all grown up. He went to war. He died in the Battle of Shiloh. Her oldest son Zeb. This is the actor. This is George Peppard.
George Peppard.
Yes.
The A-Team, and also
A-Team, yes.
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
He looks nothing like
he's young.
A-Team. Oh, he's so young. Right? It's crazy. And he joined the war with his mother's blessing. Goes over there. He's about to desert. He's going to desert with this other guy. He doesn't want to kill anybody until they come across John Wayne, and I think the guy from MASH.
Oh, I don't know, because I'll be the first to admit I never really watched MASH. I know it, but
he played the colonel. And anyway, the guy plays Ulysses Grant.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Oh my god! Right, yeah. Finished all my old movie watching on my flight. Crazy. That's awesome. So anyway, getting all the way up to this point, it's like, this is a long movie. It's just 244 minutes. When I chose this movie, Rob, I did not realize it was this long. I was like, you know what? It's got a StarCast. And then I sat down. I was like, holy crap. It's a good thing I started early. But the scenery, the music, all the production, the effort put into this with the actors and actresses, it was great. Now, would I recommend watching this movie more than once? Maybe wait a few years. You might forget a few things because it's a long movie. But it is still a good watch. I had fun with it. It's a first-time watch for me. As you can see, I'm a little excited to talk about it.
Yeah, you are. You've pretty much
Yeah,
blown through a lot of it. The thing I wanted to back up
yeah.
and mention a
Go
couple
ahead.
things from my perspective is that um, the first thing that I would think jump out with anybody, whether you like the source material or think it's cheesy or not, is this is just a damn good looking movie. However, back in the day, again, growing up in the 70s,
Hmm.
80s, and all that, and even going to the 90s with television, you had movies that would be cropped at the top or the sides to be forced to be fit in
Yeah.
because there were different technologies coming up, not just with television, of course, which is more of a standard 4:3 format, but the 69 or the other types of ratios that you see in
Yeah.
theaters. And I'm certainly no buff when it comes to this stuff. It just made it tough. And this is, I always loved the John Carpenter shots in his movies because he used to go for this huge widescreen. And I think if I recall correctly, he basically mentioned he liked westerns in a way because they would have a lot of stuff going on in the landscape. So you'd have these long drawn out shots. This is a movie that's got a lot of, but this is one of only a couple movies made in a certain type where they tried doing it, and the ratio is it's almost like roughly three,
Yeah.
widths to one height, and that's why when you see all these shots, they look kind of weird, and there's a lot of stuff not just in the background, like again, like you'd see in a John Carpenter film or what other people do, but also on the sides. And normally, if you would saw it on the TV back in the day, a lot of it would be chopped out, and also it means that when the actors are acting in it, they're kind of having a tough time focusing because they physically have to be so far apart because they use three cameras to film.
Hmm.
And it wasn't the three camera technique you used where a camera goes to the person on the left and then one right and there's one in the middle, that setup that they call like a three camera shot. This is three
Yep.
cameras to produce one. And while it's such a damn good looking film, there's still certain parts even in my
Yeah.
super HD copy that you can still see the lines where, because they're like almost like three
Yeah.
bars that put together make it, and it's good. But if it's not, and you watch this say 20 years ago on regular TV, you'd
I
be like, well, what the hell is this? I don't care who's in it, this looks like shit. But
so
man,
I
this movie looks
yeah.
so good. It looks like it was filmed yesterday. It is just so warm and so rich, and the colors and all that, and the outside shots. If you
Hmm.
haven't traveled around, I don't know how much you've traveled around the United States and seen a lot of the natural beauty that's out there, especially in some of our monuments and great parks and all that too. Holy crap, this film's got them in there with the water and everything. It just, you feel like you're there. It is awesome. I mean, visually, it's quite stunning to me. I forgot how good looking a movie can be sometimes because everything's kind of um, shot digitally these days and you can alter things with filters. But like I've always said before, when you capture an older film and it's got natural light in it and everything else, there's a certain magic
Yeah.
with it and all that that just cannot be replaced. And God dang it, this is just a good looking
So
film.
so there's a scene between Henry Fonda, who plays Jethro Stewart. He's basically like he's the brother or the friend. He's the uncle to
Mhm.
Zeb's. Basically, he's basically Zeb's uncle, I guess. And there's a scene there where they're talking about about how settling down and and like because Zeb wanted to go, he wanted to go west, he wanted to go explore some more. He's out of the military, you know, and he had just quit working for the railroad, which was basically like the guy was very racist. He didn't give a shit. He's what they painted him as being evil. But the thing is that this movie, it wasn't one sided. They showed how savages Indians were too, certain tribes.
Yep.
That is, yeah. So it went both ways. So that there was greedy white men, but then there was also some of the Indians were brutal
Get off my
savages.
land, Indian.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a painting of being like as we said earlier, like oh, it's happy rainbows. No, like there's a scene in there where just before he goes to talk to Henry Fonda, and Zeb is talking to the railroad owner, and he's like, and they just got attacked by Indians because he went on ATM. Zeb told him, "You're changing the deal. They had a deal to go through here. Now you want to go this way." And he says, "What's going to happen is that you're going to go there. You're going to kill all their buffalo." That's what the Indians are afraid of. He's like, "Well, 20, 30 years, who cares? There's going to be settlements here anyway. We'll be long dead." But because he ignored Zeb's warning, and Zeb's just like shake his head, the Indians attack, they kill people, and you get this scene, pans around. There's fires. He's talking to
Yeah.
Zeb's talking to him, and you hear this kid crying in the background. This little girl running around, and you see there's a dead body over there. My mom, it's fires, and she's all by herself. And he's like, you hear that? He's like, no, listen. He's like, you can live with that. You can live, And he's like, oh, that's nothing. That's the sound of new beginnings in our life, life. And Zeb's just like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? And so then Zeb eventually quits or gets fired. I can't remember what it was. He quits or fired. I think he quits, but goes and talks to Henry Fonda's character, Jethro, and they're at his little log cabin. He's like, well, there's a room in here for at least 2 in here. And it's like they sit there hanging out for a while. And he says, like, I was like, I want to go. He's like, that's the great thing I love this country. There's always hills. The grass is always greener outside. There's numerous hills. And Henry Fonda's like, you got to realize that was back then. Now with everybody coming in, there's no more greener grass anymore. The grass is gone. And then they show this how as the time went past, they showed how cattle open range. Now people started penning off areas with fire wires. Then cattle people had cattle order what are they called, cattle something but anyway, cattle owners had to move around, Rangers, and then your Rangers, and then you had the guys with the sheep come in, and then the guys just stand there with the sheep and his dog. And this is the saddest part of the thing. He's just sitting there with his dog, his dogs, and he's sitting there watching the sheep, and then gets shot. And then it turns, it's like, well, yeah, cattle owners don't like sheep because sheep eat all the grass, and it's like, but there was no law back then. And then the cop marshal shows up and kind of then buries him, and you see the dog just whimpering right by the dirt hill because it missed his owner. I'm like, oh, you yeah.
Oh yeah.
It is, yeah. But I love how the transitions, how they went from from different time periods. It was believable for me.
Well, and that's the thing too, is it kind of goes like a rough flavor 10 years or so, and it's interconnected with the family. But like the reason why I call it kind of clean cut sanitized is, obviously you weren't going to have the kind of violence that you would now in the movie to get a point across. But here is more about, I hate to say that there was a moral lesson in each one, but basically whatever the situation was that was presented to you early on in any of these scenes, because it was based on somebody, they either learned something new or made a decision based off of what their experience was before. And so the whole obvious comments about like the grass, always being greener, of course it's not, we just think that is. A lot of this stuff kind of illustrates, more of the human condition. And it's not a, hardcore about it, but I think it's pretty obvious at that time. And, what I mentioned in the chat there to Princess was kind of like, I think of this is a great, nice little crossover movie for people that are probably not fans of Westerns, even though they're extremely popular, especially back in the 60s and all that. And they've all pretty much all but died out. You got to remember, there's people that, still living on farms, a lot of rural populations out there too. This kind of connects with them, I think, a little bit on the more natural, humanistic level. And it's cool because like even the Confederate soldier who pops up, I'm like, I know who this dude is. And I'm like looking, I'm like, I don't get it. And George Peppard, I always think of as the A-Team because that's how I first saw him, not Tiffany's and not this, but boy, is he overacting and not very good in here. It's not, it almost like ruins it for me. And the guy I'm staring at is not him, it's the other dude. I'm like, oh, for you Twin Peaks fans, that's Russ Tamblyn. That's the guy that plays the creepy doctor with Laura Palmer that we had covered here on every episode on the Xtreme Movie Show. And I'm like, God, even this guy was in it. So it's a movie that a lot of names are attached to because a lot of them are in there in different sequences, right?
Different scenes.
It's a John Ford film, but he only really did like the first part. John Wayne's not in every part.
Three directors,
Yeah, so it's epic in its scale, what it covers, what it tries to do with the amount of people in there. It's kind of like some of the disaster movies, which you and I have only scraped the surface on in the 70s, like with Earthquake and all that, but that would have a lot of big names. And back then we kind of described it more as a soap opera with just whatever was going on as an excuse to deal with whatever tragedy was going on. And that's exactly how I took this.
You would have put, I was gonna say, if you put, she says, realize, oh, it's 18. Yeah, if you would put a cigar in his mouth, I probably would have recognized him more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was like, okay, to me, I'm like, okay, he's an older guy with white hair and a cigar, and he's the leader. Well, I don't get it, but like, oh, yeah. It's just, you're right. There's some really great shots in here. Most of it's outside. Seeing people pass away and seeing their gravestones in the back of that without any cars and trucks in the background, anything that reminds you of modern society. You're like, holy shit, it goes quick,
It was clean cut. Like I said, and it's very much of those who watch Hell on Wheels on AMC. And how they showed you had the prostitutes, you had you had the rapists, you had all that stuff, all the vile stuff, people being beheaded, you had serial killers, all the filth that you don't see in this movie. You see a little bit with the pirates, but you don't see what you would see typically if it was actually realistically, because this is 1962. They had a lot of stuff they couldn't do, so they skirted around it in a sense. But I want to point out that was really interesting because this is 1962. This is a 3 hour, almost a 3 hour movie, 2 hours and 44 minutes.
Hmm.
And I'm curious what the reaction was to a long movie like that compared, because I know a lot of people
It was more
think,
commonplace. Movies
because
stayed around
yeah,
longer. There were
people,
less of them,
yeah,
and especially epics. You got to understand, like Charlton Heston, a lot of the big movies that he was in were like 2 hours plus or really close to it. I mean, and that's why when he started getting on popular television, say in the '70s and moving on forward, you'd have them as two parts. You'd have a part here the first night, and the second part the other night, especially say at Easter and Christmas. But even
yeah,
big ones like this, these epics and these grand scale ones, it was an event when it would come on. It'd be in the TV guide or whatever, wherever you would get your schedule a month ahead of time, a week ahead of time, and that's how it'd be. So it moved at a more deliberate type of pace. And westerns, like I say, were so commonplace. Even though they've died out, it was still, again, this we're talking 1962.
yeah,
So what, 38, 48, 58, over 60 years ago, this movie came out. And when you look at it, you're like, holy crap, just how beautiful it looks. And
right.
it's a time that that doesn't ever get looked at anymore because we're
Mhm.
more than one or two generations removed from when most people were growing up on farms, didn't have electricity, and didn't have to live a very rough life, all things considered. And you know, God forbid my Uber Eats doesn't provide me my snack here before I'm getting ready to go live with you on the internet across the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds silly, but that's just kind of how it is. It's they're
So
out of
my
bar, like you
point
say, they
was,
don't have the dirty stuff in it, but it's the adult stuff, and you recognize it for what it
yeah.
is. It's the
So
same.
my point was the question, because saying how, compared to today, because it's today people bitch if it's more than an hour and a half, or like, oh my gosh, 3 hour movie, I can't sit there for 3 hours. I'm like, honestly, if it's a good movie, you don't even notice. This movie is, and I went right through it. It didn't feel that long. Now, the only reason it might have felt that long to some people because it was weird because you had an intermission in the middle, which
Yeah.
I thought was a jip because it was like less than 2 minutes. I had to pee. I was like, what kind of intermission is this? I want to get snacks. I can't get
I
snacks.
think that would have been put into the whatever print that you saw, because
Yeah.
obviously mine's a very good print. The intermission, I think, was a
Yeah.
little bit longer, but in a real movie, it might have been like 10 to 15 minutes, if I
Uh,
recall. At least my parents and grandparents told me that you'd have enough time to go out, use the
no,
restroom,
no.
stand, walk around, stretch your legs, talk for a few minutes about it, and then get back in. Because it's not like today where you're 10 minutes late and the movie's already running, you just walk in. Back then, people, they would close the doors and all that. You just would not be in a situation
Yeah.
where you'd be late. That
I
was
got,
also more important back then.
I spent the $12 on Vudu to watch it in HD.
Yeah, definitely worth it.
Yeah, definitely worth it. And I'm Verity is saying that, oh, these movies nowadays are too long. Well, bad movies are too long. That's the problem. If you have a good movie and actually you make it this long, I don't mind it. Hell, you had songs back in the day, in the 70s and 80s. There were about 7 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. Some were 12.
Stranglehold.
Yeah. I mean, Pink Floyd. I mean, uh, Metallica. You had the longer songs nowadays. Because remember, because you got to realize that in the 50s, remember the songs, they were like 2 minutes, or 1 minute, and they get paid for that, and they do like multiple tracks. So when you got like you listen to Leonard Skinner, Freebird, and all those songs, I love that, and I love that with the movies too. If you have a good product and you're able to do it a little longer, that's cool. I mean, like we just watched another movie before. We reviewed it. Was it last week, or was it this Tuesday? Can't remember if it was Tuesday or it was last Sunday. I think it went Tuesday. The Three Musketeers movie. We watched that one. That's a part one, and
Yeah,
that was almost a 2.5 hour movie.
yeah.
And I thought it was worth it. Now I had subtitles. You didn't have subtitles.
Well, I'd asked Princess in there if she thought the people were a little Euro trashy because she'd made the comment about them not being particularly attractive. They definitely had a European look, right? And go, oh, he's hot, because I have no
Yeah,
problem saying that or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
This movie was definitely hot just because it looks so good. And I wanted to point this out too as we're kind of closing up here a little bit. What I thought that was really kind of cool too, and we mentioned this before when we talked about what was it, Out of the Past, or whatever, the Humphrey Bogart movie, and we mentioned San Francisco as a city in a few movies too, from the 40s to the
Mhm.
70s, and how a lot of times when we'd seen an old gangster film or something, you get shots of the city. It was cool back then.
Yeah.
But here at the end of this film, I'm like, oh my God, this feels so epic, because the last few minutes where you see the
Yeah.
West transitioning to where they've got more cultivated land, you've got the flying shots going, everything that we'd call it a drone shot today. This was
Yeah.
not easy to do back in the 60s. And you see the freeways and the highways, and you see see progress being made because, of course, the last story is more of a train kind of thing, and now we've got planes and all that. But it's
It's
just,
yeah.
if you
It,
like films at all, I think this is one that eventually you've got to watch, even if it's just once, like to your point, because it's significant in that it's an epic, it's a Western, which different directors, like a John Ford film, would be different than, say, a Howard Hawks versus this person or director. But to kind of see how they would choose to film things and what they would focus on is
Mhm.
really interesting. And if you notice in this film, just physically looking at somebody, the way they'd be positioned, and if you know that this was filmed in like 3 different cameras, you could almost see where they intentionally put like a tent if
Yeah.
you're outside, or a pine tree or something, where those lines would be able to kind of hide it, because they know that putting those 3 together physically, again, not computerized, was a big pain in the ass. And then you see the scenes at the end, you're like, holy crap, they really did a great job here. But you've got to see a super high def version, probably on the big screen, if this ever came out, like during the summer films, or like a small theater that plays specialty movies and all this. I would put this on my short list to go see, not because I'd want to sit there for 3 hours and go, oh, it's a great film, because it's honestly, it's kind of weak. It's not really about the story. It's just about presenting scenes just so we can
Mhm.
look at stuff. So it's a bit superficial, and I have no problem with that. But boy, I go, this is one, probably if I saw it on the big screen like Lawrence of Arabia, I would just be blown away with it, because those are on my short list of what to see on the big screen rather than
Yeah.
on the television. I can't tell you what it was like to go see like Blade Runner or some of the movies in the early '80s on the big screen
Yeah.
rather than on television. It's just, it wows you, like the transition from standard TV def to high def was back in the late 1990s, or whatever year that really became mainstream. But this movie, watching it, I'm like, oh my god, this must have blown people away with just how gorgeous it was.
Yeah.
And
And
star-studded, like to your point,
yeah.
everybody's in here who's a name. Everybody looks good. A lot of people are very young. I mean, there's a lot of
But
heavy hitters.
I said we're going into the, or was it Tuesday, talking about doing this, and I said, man, this is what the Meg was supposed to be, but the Meg flopped. This I don't know the box office on this, but I mean, this is so much more fun. I'm not a Western person. I saw that Verity said, it put in the chat. She's like, I'm not really a Western person, but you love this. I love
Yeah,
it too. It didn't really feel like a Western. It felt more like a documentary, almost in a sense. Like in a sense, to me, it's like watching um, World War II in color, on the History Channel. I love it. Information stuff of this, and I gotta say, there's 3 big things that helped me with this, because I'm an action guy. So that very very beginning, with the pirates, the White River Rapids, I love that.
right.
And then we get the Indians attacking them. Greg Peck has to detach the horses, and then they fall off, and then trying that part, and then the last part, the train robbery.
Yeah,
George Papard. He's like, he tells you, like, his wife. He's like, don't go. No, you don't have to go. He's like, and he's got the other marshal over there. He's like, I don't want you causing any trouble in my town. I'm thinking, like, what are you gonna take, bro? Why you get your panties in a bunch? You know. And so he ends up going on. And he's like, I love how Debbie Reynolds' character Lilith, talks to his wife and tries to make a little joke and says, like, I guess it's not so funny too soon. Or because about her husband go like, oh, he's a gambler. She says, guys are all the same. Don't try to change them. You're going into this, you basically accept them what they are. Basically, kind of like a little speech like that. But the train scene at the end, though, how it derails, and then he almost gets pinned by first he almost gets because they're fighting on the train while still going for these rails. The log comes off the chain, and he's almost getting crushed by the logs. They're shooting each other, and it's Henry Dean. I think is it Henry Dean Stockton that's firing at him? Plays the dweeb.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't. But I kept thinking, I'm like, this looks like the guy from the Tulsa King, the Armand or whatever it is, the little guy, the mustache,
Right.
and so after the train derails and the train almost hits him, he quick jumps out of the way. And I love it. He just goes up there. I'm thinking like the end, like, oh, because he got the bad guy there. The guy's lying on the ground. He puts his gun there. I'm like, is he gonna shoot him? Like, no. They just later on, they cut to the scene, and I'm thinking, what is he loading up? I'm like, I thought there were pine boxes at first. Is that luggage though?
Yeah,
And they end up leaving. But then it transcends. It shows you how the land looked like, and then it gets rebuilds, and then just comes into San Francisco. The camera, they use the helicopter shots going stuff because they didn't have drones back then, so everything was on helicopter, which I loved. Man, so the whole the transition scene at the end, I kept thinking what Gregor Peck says. Like he said to her to the left. He said, San Francisco, it's a beautiful town. It's gonna be torn down, rebuilt back up again multiple times. But don't worry, we're gonna be rich. And they ended up being rich. She ended up after he passed away. She sold out their mansion. She was selling off her goods, estate sale, her mansion. She had this beautiful mansion. And I love how, she's sitting in the chair and the guy's like, the guy's auctioning off this piece. And she's like, priceless. We use it as a doorstop. I'm like, was she that uber rich or was it that this worthless? But it sold for like $2,500. I was like back then, that's $1 million. You're a billionaire. If you had that much money, you're rich. Because remember, $100 back then was like that was a big thing too. But like going up to over 2,000, you were considered well off, and she had the really fancy stuff. And I love the fact that she did not become a rich snob, even because most people do when they get wealth. She stayed the way that she was. It's like I said, it was just a good movie all the way through from the very beginning to the end. I kind of felt bad. I'm like, oh, more Jimmy Stewart, you bastards! I wanted more because he's actually interesting in this. John Wayne was in it for like a glimpse.
Yep.
Just
put his name on it.
Just a little blink, he's gone.
He did Bruce Willis before Bruce Willis did.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. And Debbie Reynolds, dude, she's hot in this movie. Like I said, no more. I would have been like, hey, you want to hang out sometime? She is very beautiful. I mean, yeah. All the women here were good looking, and as I've already said, they all had moxie. They all had can-do attitudes. None of them were pushovers.
Yeah. Obviously things have changed, or you could argue that they have, but I think back then, of course, there's various levels of society kind of stuff or whatever that just doesn't exist anymore, is very small and not in demand, so you're not going to see it on big screens or whatever, and which is kind of what it is. So it's always interesting when you see some of these older films, because again, that stuff doesn't go away just because it was an old film. People did drink and screw and fool around, and all that's human nature, so they would just have to kind of get at it in a different way. And so here, you can see that the women, I was kind of only not really joking when I said, they're kind of hot to trot and good to go when they're really young. Well, yeah, everybody was kind of a little cut to the chase a bit more, especially back then in the dirty old West, the Wild West. I mean, it's just an allegory for the unknown and having to conquer it, which is the human condition and what America was built on. So I think there's a fundamental level of attachment to Westerns because of that innate curiosity that a lot of people that came here from other places that had it hard and said, at least here I have an opportunity to make my own way. And again, not getting into politics of it, I just think that message is more earnest. You saw a lot of American flags in here. You've seen it in older films there too, where it was a big deal about what they had and held on to. And you made a comment about them not being a rich snob, and I get it, because how you get it is important. And back then, you're still on the gold standard where you didn't have this real asymmetric discrepancy in wealth.
You bring up a good point though about the whole American flag stuff. And then I want to go back. I just remembered the whole Civil War thing. Zeb says, it's like I don't understand this. This war started in the East. Why is it coming out to the West? Why am I involved in this war? And they never really established more on that because the guy tried to kill Ulysses Grant, so he gets killing him. I was like, we know why. It's like, and like he just came off one of those peace guys, like I hate war and I detest it. It's like, even though if it's for a good cause, it's don't defend itself. It was that stuck with me, and he said because he came off, as like everyone's a war hawk, but me.
Well, and the other thing too is
what?
It's a resource thing. You could argue the North versus South might have been about this. You could say, well, which one had more resources, and how do you feed, and how do you do this and do that, and you can always talk about how that's always been an issue, and you could argue that's why in the early 1900s we kind of got off of a gold standard a little bit, and how things have gotten worse since then, and we've had more wars. I mean, I'm not saying that's relevant to the movie, but the point is in this movie, if you got something, you earned it, it was yours. You treated your equipment with respect because, damn it,
Yeah.
your life could very well depend on it, right? And
Mhm.
it's not just your guns; it's your farmstead stuff and your techniques and how you do stuff. And so it was kind of real. You had to learn how to do stuff
Yep.
and be self sufficient. Otherwise, you were not going to last long.
Yeah.
But
Her
again, they don't
brother.
get into that too much. But
Yeah.
with the pirate thing you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
I think that was just supposed to be more of a threat rather than, okay, here's people that are going the other way out and just stealing stuff because, how people would deal with pirates. They wouldn't put up with them, stealing
Well,
nine hundred
they
fifty nine
talked about
dollars
that. They
worth
talked
of
about
stuff like they do
they talked.
today.
So they talked about that. Those settlements finally became, settlers. After a while, became established towns, and they got sick of time of the crime. So they hired marshals and stuff.
Yep.
So the time of the outlaw was over. And I kept thinking, like, man, like I'm thinking Gun Guns too. When the time of the outlaw is over, they're all going after the outlaws. I was like, it's like I love those kind of spaghetti westerns. When you have I know Jesse James was not a nice guy, but man, do they love to paint him as being is he gets the
It's
romance drama.
romanticized. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
And same with Billy the Kid. You know, it's that life. Like you can see now the way they paint it, making the guys look like they're just guys, misunderstood guys with corrupt government stuff. And I'm thinking like I'm sure a few might have been, but I mean, but clearly if you're going around murdering tons and tons of people, it gets to the point where you can't really romanticize anymore, especially it's yeah. But anyway,
I'll close with this,
yeah,
then hand it to you. It reminds me of was it The Real Story? I forget what the name of it. An older one that doesn't get talked about how Thanksgiving came about, and you always hear about the bounty and sharing with Indians and planting a fish head with
yeah,
each corn and all this crap, and how they
yeah.
taught us this and we taught them that, and you're like, oh gosh, that's great, and we should be thankful and all that stuff, and nobody realizes that when people came over here from England originally, before the United States was found, before the whole idea of liberty and doing stuff on your own, that people kind of came over here as almost like on their own communes, and they'd work some land, and if
Yeah.
everybody worked on the land, everybody's expected to work together. Well, it's kind of commie-ish, really, no matter what word you want to put on it. And that's why most people starved and died, is because they couldn't figure it out. It's because, oh, I busted my ass today, but you kind of slept in a little bit and didn't do too much or wasn't feeling good, but then
Mhm.
yet you ate half of what I made or whatever your portion was. And it wasn't until people were given their own, in an emergency, hey, you can get your 5 acres and you can get your 5 acres, but you can only eat what's on your
Yeah.
5 acres. And it's like all of a sudden, oh shit, you got to be able to produce on your own. And you figured out, oh, guess what?
Mhm.
I've got extra stuff. Now I'm going to trade with you. Oh, now I can trade with Indians. Now I can. Then you start seeing what happened. And that's when they talked about the gold rush briefly here, the reason why that was
Yeah.
important, besides how, it made our story go out west, literally, it was the fact that if you could go through all that to get gold, it meant a life-changing opportunity and how hard people would really work
Yeah.
for it. Now,
Uh,
personally, I'd prefer more of a John Huston-ish cynical take on, the human condition, like we saw,
mhm.
say, in Humphrey Bogart movies like Treasure of Sierra Madre and those types of films, because I think it's a bit more realistic and more emotionally attached. But like Princess is saying in chat, it would have been kind of interesting to hear more about these people and how they went on. But it's very
Yeah.
glossy, it's very slick, but it's done very well. I think it's a good movie. Each person
Yeah.
should probably
I,
check
like
out.
I said, I'm glad that they painted. If they didn't paint like as all Native Americans, Indians as savages, because not all of them were.
Right.
There were. It's just like Matt. It's just like us. There's good and evil. As a back then, some settlers, well, some were racist, but also some were scared for their lives. So they figured anybody came across that was Native American was going to kill them because they heard the stories, because people would spread gossip. Oh, they did this. They scalped this, because there were some tribes who did not like this. They didn't like the fact that we were encroaching on their land. I understand there. Some of them was self
Across the
defense,
borders,
maybe.
you're bringing that disease and filth, white boy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly too. They talk about that. So I love the fact that it wasn't just like one side was like, oh, we're perfect, and the other ones are evil. No, they were both. It was muddied water.
Yeah.
And that's how it is today too.
Yeah.
So I said I respect for that. I give them that props for that. But man,
Any
fun
other final
movie.
thoughts?
Final thoughts. This is a fun movie. 2 hours and 44 minutes. The music, the hymn gets stuck in your it's be stuck in your mind for the rest of the night. I guarantee it.
Pretty simple, huh?
I know. Like it's a church hymn, and it's also, I think it's also a Christmas hymn or a song, isn't it?
I don't know.
Oh, I know I've heard it before, but it's fun.
That's bugging you.
Oh, yes. Senior Pixel, are you planning on jumping in here, or are you just gonna? Or I guess you're gonna jump in afterwards.
Is it
That's right.
Greensleeves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have if it was.
Yeah.
Huh.
Is it Greensleeves?
God damn it! I'm gonna have to go look at that.
I know, but I'm like, I know, back in the day growing up, we sung it in church. I know that. It's at least 20 different variations with the words and words. But the guy who wrote the songs was Alfred something. I forget if it was name.
Alfred Newman, not
Alfred
to
Newman.
be confused with Alfred E. Newman, aka from Mad Magazine. What Me Worry.
Yeah.
Very important distinction.
Yeah,
Just
so
throwing that out there for
How
you.
the West Was
Won.
Won. Beautiful soundtrack. Chef's kiss, bro. I love it.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. How the West Was Won, 1962. Yeah. Green Sleeves, yeah, that was an oldie and a goodie, as they say. Yeah, Pixel looks like he's not joining us, but that's fine. He's young. He's got the years ahead of him. And long after you and I have since passed away, he'll still be young and have movies to watch, and this will be one of them. We'll have to let him know that. That's why he and I are doing the James Bond movies in order. So before this, we just finished up doing Octopussy with James Bond, which is like this film, pretty fun and kind of superficial. And okay, it was very good Roger Tainment. I will say that.
All I'll just say is that I hope you're refilling your glass tonight when you go to the bar with milk.
All right, guys, have a good night. Stay extreme. See you Tuesday.
Later, guys.